So Scott, do any of the LPS officers currently have body cams, or is this something that you're actively looking into?
So part of our 2019 to 2022 business plan, 40 business plan, is initiated research and implementation of body cams for our police service. So it's something we've been looking at. We've been researching over the last year since 2019. We're in the process actually of getting down to a couple of vendors where we're hoping to have a pilot project start within the police service here in late fall of this year or January of 2021, actually.
Sorry, would you mind looking in this general direction,
Sure.
just for our cameras so we can,
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was just answering this question.
sorry.
It's okay.
And so I guess prior to finishing up all that work to get it ready, what do you think the cost implications of getting this for the service might end up being?
Well, I don't have hard numbers on that. The actual costs for hardware, et cetera, aren't too bad. Where your big costs come in for policing is data storage, data management, and maintenance. Because when you think about it, if we have 25, 30, 40 body cameras out on a shift, a 12-hour shift of officers continually filming the interactions and the calls for service they're going through, that has to go in and be stored. And those volumes of data become greater and greater, and particularly with digital storage now that we're keeping for upwards of 25 years. So that's where your costs come in. Your costs will also come in with having to take pieces out of a long section of video that are necessary for court or otherwise. That's where the costs come in. So I don't have hard costs on that. Again, that's part of what we're just finalizing here as we move forward.
Is there going to be any sort of, I guess, penalty, let's say if you guys do get the body cameras, if they're switched off during a call or something like that? Because I've heard a lot of citizens saying like their concern is that if they get switched off in the middle of something like an altercation, then what would be the point?
Right, and that's a valid point. I guess we'd have to look at each individual situation. With any new initiative we implement, again, we're going to put in policies that include procedures and what's expected of our officers. Now, I don't know enough about body cams, but the likelihood if somebody was actually involved in a physical altercation of them shutting off, et cetera. So we'd have to look at each one individually. But the purpose of having a body cam would be for it to be recording the interactions of officers, and that would be the status or the outcome we want our officers to be doing. We wouldn't want to invest in something like that to not be able to use it. Obviously, it's there to protect the public and our officers. And I think some of the spin-offs that we've seen with with Calgary, for example, somebody that we've been researching with, what they've done, they initially started a program and they ended up discarding that and going with a different vendor and stuff. But some of the offshoots they're starting to see too is also there's been some increase in guilty pleas and some of the things in court that previously weren't because these interactions are being recorded.
Talk a little bit about the other benefits.
The other benefits about, well, it's transparency for police, right? And again, I think it all comes back down to what we've talked about here a couple times recently is trust, right? Trust for the public, trust for anybody that we're interacting with, trust with the media, right? And that's, I would suggest, in the front view of a lot of people these days. And it's one step towards building that trust, again, back with policing and the communities we serve. I mean, it's not, I don't personally think it's going to solve all the problems. It's a step in the right direction. Really, truly, we're going to solve the problems is through relationships, right? Listening and hearing the concerns that are being brought forward to us, working together and forging the path forward that we need to in order to carve a new path forward in some of the business practices and some of the things that policing's been doing for an extended period of time.
So the Prime Minister just recently said that he's going to be pushing premiers to have more police services get body cams or potentially make them mandatory. So I guess from your perspective, does that just make it make you a little more confident that this is something that will get approved and will be part of LPS?
Yeah, so I've heard of it, but I haven't actually read anything particular what the Prime Minister said. So we certainly support it, particularly if federal and provincial governments are going to start wanting to share some of the costs with us, because again, I said some of these costs are going to be not cheap in the long run to have that technology in place. But I think we're also at a place where we have to look at whether we cannot afford to do it too. So I think I welcome anything that both provincial and federal are looking at initiatives to help get us there sooner.
Assuming that the process of continuing to look into things goes smoothly, and assuming you do get the approval from the city, any idea potentially when this could be approved or we could see body cams on officers?
Well, like I said, from a standpoint of our police service, we've implemented this process like back to 2019 where we want to get it going on a pilot project. whether we have one or two vendors to help us select where we want to go at the end of that project, would take us likely into the near end of 2020. So we certainly are looking forward to having that, be in a position to see what our costing will be into our next budget cycle. But if that gets accelerated through other means and we can get that implemented sooner, we'd certainly welcome that as well.
So potentially by the end of this year, we could maybe see a pilot program started?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, we're shooting towards the fall of this year is where we've been going. Again, we're down to a couple different vendors. We may actually look at choosing two vendors just for comparison purposes. So our goal is by the fall of this year or winter of 2020. If not, starting in January is where we want to go.
And how long, when was this brought up? Was this brought up prior to all the protesting, the fact of like even having the idea of body cams, or did the protests and stuff kind of initiate that conversation?
No, so it's something that I brought up as a deputy chief, so I brought forward back in 2018. We built it into our 2019 to 2022 business plan. So it's been there. It's something that in 2019 we started moving forward with and started researching, looking at what other police services are doing across the nation so we could actually carve our own path forward, what that looked like for the Lethbridge Police Service. And we've got to a point prior to these protests where we're moving towards launching a pilot here in the fall again, or if not January of next year for our police service.
And I guess, since we haven't been able to discuss it, what were your thoughts on how the protests were conducted? Do you think that they were done in a peaceful manner, or was there any complaints?
I haven't heard anything other than, I think the group on Thursday, I believe it was about 450 people. It was peaceful. Their message was heard loud and clear. And so, like I said prior to it, we welcome anybody that wanted to get out and protest as long as they could do it peacefully. And I haven't heard of anything negative come back from that. We've heard the protests, and now it's time to start moving forward with a path and how we're going to address the concerns that are out there.
Just going back to what Vanessa said earlier, say in a hypothetical situation, if there's an officer that does happen to turn on a body cam, how would that situation be addressed?
Well, again, hypothetical is pretty tough to speak to. So again, each incident is individualistic as to why would it be off? Is it malfunctioning? Is there a physical struggle which led to being off, or did the officer turn it off on themselves? So I would suggest that's going to come back to our policy and procedure. Potentially there could be some ramifications under the Police Act for neglect of duty, but again, I don't want to speak of something that's not in place yet, but those would be some potential hypothetical outcomes that could go from there.
Lastly, aside from the body cams, is the police service looking to do anything else to assure the needs of people of color and the Indigenous community right now, aside from the body cams?
Well, I think from the standpoint that I've discussed before is we need to actually start listening, getting together with some of these community groups and et cetera, and start sitting down and working together and addressing what the concerns are, first identifying what they are, and then looking forward to moving forward on a path in order to address those concerns as we go forward on that. But as far as technology, body cams are one thing that, like I said, prior to the George Floyd thing that we've been moving forward on. We're also looking at, we do have cameras in some of our police cars, which we're also looking at expanding into that a little bit more, having more police cars with in-car cameras, as we call them, recording the events from the police car.
Thank you.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you.